today, I'm going to talk about the history of incentives for humanity and also what we can do to improve incentives. And I can give you a quick spoiler. It's going to be using the forces of incentives to actually solve incentive issues. So a quick way of background, I'm a medical doctor. I've been investing for 21 years at Palo Investors. But I think I'm also as known for running these grand challenges. In 2014, we launched the Palo Alto Longevity Prize to address longevity. And then more recently, our family donated a couple $1 million to the National Academy of Medicine to launch their Healthy Longevity Grand Challenge. So I want to talk about that experience and then segue into taking on an even greater challenge on behalf of the world. So when I think about aging, it's literally the most important problem in the medical sciences. It's actually what's creating a lot of the healthcare costs. As a doctor and as an investor in healthcare, you know, the industry's been doing a fantastic job of helping increase the length of life, the quality of life, but doing so without ending aging has produced this kind of picture. So people are getting older but sicker, so they need more health care, and this becomes a vicious cycle. So the more successful we are, the more the system needs us. So this is like a mythical, self-expanding beast. And in 15 years, there's an Annals of Family Medicine article that came out. The study said in 15 years, the average cost of taking care of an American will equal the average income in America. So what we really want is a healthcare system that keeps people so healthy that it puts itself out of business. And what we've ended up instead is we've ended up with a system where the system's putting people out of business. So can we do better? And that was kind of the genesis behind getting behind the National Academy of Medicine's Healthy Longevity Grand Challenge. This effort is spearheaded by Victor Zhao, the president of the National Academy of Medicine. And the design is co-committed by Nobel laureate Bob Horowitz and Tachi Yamada. And it's a world-class board. And as I watched them design this challenge over the last few years, a couple of things really struck me. Number one, grand challenges typically have a winner-take-all model. So most of the time, there's actually no winner, and there's no celebration. The way they designed it was more upside down. Have lots of winners, and turn them into a grand challenge. So I'm thrilled to tell you that this summer, there'll be an announcement from nations across the world. It's a very special announcement. They'll be donating 450 awards for aging scientists, fully funded. This is from 35 nations. That are going to tournament into the Grand Challenge together. So this really has become a global affair. And when we sat down to talk about this at the National Academy back in March, I was really struck by just the spirit of collaboration. I remember a lot of these countries actually have geopolitical issues between them. They don't always get along for other reasons, but in the context of this challenge, all the differences went away. I mean, we thought it'd be challenging to get everybody, 35 nations, to agree on anything, including, here we're trying to get them to agree on rules and who the reviewers are, timing, communication. First question, first country, the answer was, Mr. Chairman, we just want to let you know that we chatted during the bathroom break, and we all agreed to agree on everything you ask us to do, which was an incredible sentiment. And as that sentiment echoed around the room, you could feel the joy kind of erupt within the room. So that night, during my closing remarks at dinner, I reflected on the following. We've always needed an alien invasion to promote global peace. And in many ways, aging is one of those alien invasions, right? I mean, it's something that affects everybody, and it should be uniting us. Same thing with grand challenges such as the space program. It's these huge missions that tends to encourage collaboration. And, I thought about the fact that I don't know if we're going to end up really ending aging through this challenge, I think we'll make a huge impact. I'm encouraged. But even if we don't solve aging, in the process, we might actually solve global peace. So as a hedge fund guy, that's a pretty good hedge, right? Either we end aging or we promote global peace. So I want to take what I learned from that experience and really apply it to something bigger, something that affects all of us in the investment business, but something that affects really all of us living in today's global village. You know, when I look back at what was the core thing that was holding back ending aging, right? Because ending aging is addressing aging, solving aging, improving the aging process, is probably the most important thing we can do for the healthcare system. Because, again, aging is what's contributing to the rising healthcare costs. And the fact that it wasn't being pursued was so interesting looking back. Now, you know, there's a lot of movements, exciting movements going on in aging, but, you know, 10 years ago, it was a pretty fallow field. There was no IP being filed, there's no companies, there's no venture capital. Well, here's the reason why. Because there is no FDA endpoint for human longevity trials. It just takes too long, right? It would take centuries to run a clinical trial. Because there's no regulatory endpoint, there's no venture capital. So in many ways, it was actually a failure of incentives. And all we did was take the incentives from not ending aging. Remember, there's plenty of incentives right now to not address aging, right? The current system is really focused on short-term things. And then you have this whack-a-mole system that is healthcare. All we did was move the incentives from not ending aging to addressing aging, and all of a sudden, an avalanche of interest emerged. So in many ways, incentives are what's both preventing us from greatness, and incentives is what can help get us there. And that's what's really exciting, right? The good news is people are motivated by incentives. That's the good news. But when I think about what's happening today across the land, incentives are actually getting in the way of building a healthier society for everyone. You know, the healthcare system is one example, but Lori mentioned this too. You know, the fake news culture is its own self-expanding beast. You know, they give you more of it. They grow, they're stronger, they give you more of it. You know, you can make the same argument about foods, clickbait foods, right? I mean, they give you sugary foods and they grow and they give you more sugary foods. So these are all self-expanding beasts, and you know, when you look across the land now, they're everywhere. Almost every industry is evolving towards these self-expanding beasts. So in healthcare, we have this invisible invasion of aging that's affecting everybody. I think at culture at large, there's this invisible invasion of misaligned incentives. Okay, so when you look back on history, let me give you a quick perspective on incentives through the lens of history. For most of human evolution, we lived in kin tribes, and in a kin tribe, you have genetic vested interest in each other's success. This is known as inclusive fitness, and the mathematical model behind this is known as Hamilton's rule. Anybody heard of Hamilton's rule? Okay, this is exciting because moving Hamilton's rule over to economics, I think, will have transformative impact. Hamilton's rule basically says that you act according to where you have genetic vested interest. So when you have a child, as a mom and dad, you have 50% carried interest in the success of your children. You benefit as they benefit. For grandchildren, nieces, and nephews, you have 25% carried interest. If we had actually figured this out earlier, we probably would have started hedge funds a whole lot earlier. Anyway, for most of human evolution, we lived in these kin tribes where we had this interdependence on each other's success. And it drove evolution for millions of years. And then something good happened. We got a hold of the Promethean fire. This, by the way, sorry, I missed that slide. We got hold of the Promethean fire. We got hold of technology. We got hold of energy. And all of a sudden, we left home. All of us left our kin tribes. And we now live in a community of strangers in a melting pot. And once you have no skin in the game in each other's success, you focus more on yourself. And it becomes about self-interest and competition. So for most of human evolution, we lived with vested interest in each other. We were investors, and now we live in a everybody for themselves competitive culture. It really is about trading. And trade has done wonderful things, right? I mean, there's so many win-wins out there, and society has flourished as because of trade. But we've also paid a pretty big price. You know, in nature, all animals live still in their kin tribes. We're actually the only species that live in this community of strangers. And what happens when you live in community of strangers is two things. First, when you live according to self-interest and you have competition, there's always power asymmetry that emerges over time. So once kinship was replaced by kinship, the leaders started to rule over people instead of on behalf of the people. So empires and monarchies emerged everywhere. And then finally, Plato wrote the Republic and said, no, that's not okay. Let's actually govern ourselves. Let's vote our own people in. And it was certainly a good idea, but republics also collapsed because the leaders there also didn't have skin in the game, so they self-dealed. And in 500 years, all the republics collapsed. And then we went back to monarchies and empires for 15 centuries. And then in the 16th century, something very special happened. It was the invention of the joint stock company. So for the first time since we left the kin tribe era, we were able to establish skin in the game that looked like skin in the game. You could all get on the same page. You all had vested interest in each other's success. Phenomenal idea, except those trading companies didn't include third world as stakeholders. Capital also didn't include labor as stakeholders. So anybody you leave out from a stakeholding perspective, you end up extracting from. So colonialism, imperialism, the split between capitalism and socialism, they all come from the lack of mimicking the skin in the game of kin tribes and updating it with inclusive stakeholding in the modern era. You know, in that context, Silicon Valley actually included labor, and that's their main innovation. Including labor as a stakeholder allowed them to flourish. And that's what made Silicon Valley the entrepreneurial juggernaut that it is today. But of course, they didn't include users, so now you got another round of upheavals. So just like with aging, think about all this as just whack-a-moles. We never really understood the moral philosophy or the economics behind all this. We've been doing a better job of building these concentric circles, but we really never understood the problem we're trying to solve. The problem we're trying to solve is we're trying to replace the inclusive fitness of kin villages with the inclusive stakeholding of the global village. And we're this close, this close. And I think if we can do this last part, I think we're off to the races in terms of creating that great society. So that's the reason why our family is donating a $1 million grand challenge on interdependence. It's an incentive prize on incentives. So we actually want to use incentives as a way to innovate incentives. Does that make sense? Well, we want to use the forces that are out there to create a self-driving revolution where we can address these perverse incentives, misalignment of incentives, and create a much better world for everybody. And we're doing this as a prize. I'm going to give you a couple examples, but of course we want to hear your ideas. Imagine health insurers getting paid based on health savings 10 years down the road. They become an investor in your health. Imagine teachers getting rewarded based on success of students 10 years down the road. They become an investor in your success. Imagine AI, where the algorithm is unconditional love, where they win as you win. Instead of trying to do function, they're focused on service. You know, this is codename mom. By the way, don't forget Mother's Day, everybody. So to me, it's not what it does, it's who it serves. And if you can get back into alignment with each other, I think we can now finally start to flourish again in a way that feels good to everybody. I want to encourage you to participate. It's called Declaration of Interdependence, a Grand Challenge of Interdependence. We have a new book on this. I can show you the title of the book. Sorry, I'm just going to skip ahead because I think we're going to run out of time. And it describes what we're looking for. It's a $1 million grand challenge. We want people to do it because it's great business. Right now, doing inclusive stakeholding, including everybody, is what people want. And to flourish as a company, I think this is great business. Second, do it for your community. Right now we live in neighborhoods where people don't have skin in the game in each other's welfare. So it feels too competitive. It doesn't feel good. So even though technologically we're getting better, we feel so lonely. And we can rebuild your communities by rebuilding interdependent stakeholding among your communities. And third, do it because the winds of history are at your backs. Participate because this is where the world's going. I mean, we've been trying to transition from the kin village era from 100,000 years ago before the diaspora to the global village era, and we're almost there. And if we can align incentives, because when you have malaligned incentives, it feels like a race to the bottom. If you get incentives aligned, it's going to be a race to the top. So thank you so much.